Tonight, a long weekend marred by violence as shootings across the city leave 17 people injured.
It was like a dynamite, or 3-4 times. Believe it or not, I scared like hell.
We will be putting additional resources in specific places.
Toronto has rarely seen such a violent weekend. Tonight, residents in one affected neighborhood come together in their search for answers. Plus,
the words kind of can't describe it.
It would be nice if the laws changed because that would certainly give the horse a lot more protection.
An Ontario woman is searching for her horse sold out from under her and calling for tighter regulations in the equine industry. And Andreescu versus Bouchard, both women coming back from injuries, facing off tonight at the Rogers Cup. Good evening, I'm Mike Wise. There's still plenty of concern in our city tonight after a long weekend that saw 14 shooting incidents right across the city in just 3 days. The violence started Saturday with a shooting near Dufferin and Lawrence. 2 people were shot there. Then things ramped up over the last 2 days, the long weekend. Shootings all around the city from the Bridle Path to Liberty Village, Etobicoke to Scarborough. By the end of Monday night, 17 people had been shot in Toronto. And while the number of shootings is shocking, incredibly, no one died as a result of them. Chris Glover has more on a city once again calling for solutions to a gun problem that seems out of control.
A man was shot overnight outside this Toronto community housing building in the city's East End.
It wasn't like a gunshot, it was like a dynamite, or 3-4 times.
Neighbors still reeling from a weekend with more than a dozen separate shootings.
Who you can blame, the police or who? The police they do their best anyway, but what can they do?
Despite mountains of evidence, like this new video captured during the shooting at the District 45 Club yesterday morning in North York, no arrests yet.
I find this one very bothersome.
The chief of police is fed up.
We think this one is very solvable. There were a lot of people that were there, and some people, no doubt, are afraid. We will be putting additional resources in specific places.
But even the posh Bridle Path neighborhood dealt with a shooting this weekend, and the chief won't say where extra officers are going.
It's a sort of controlled chaos.
At trauma centers like Toronto's St. Mike's, doctors dealing with the casualties are now lobbying for a ban on semi-automatic and assault rifles.
The majority of the economically developed nations of the world have acted on this evidence and put strict controls on civilian access to certain kinds of guns. And we ask our government to do the same.
Mayors from Toronto to Montreal are calling for a handgun ban.
If we have a choice of doing absolutely everything that we possibly can in order to stem this tide of gun violence, then I do believe that a handgun ban would make some difference.
But today, as the Liberals gear up for re-election, the public safety minister would only say a gun violence strategy is coming.
We are examining our own circumstances. We're observing, obviously, what other countries have done or not done.
This criminologist points out many guns used in shootings in Toronto are illegally smuggled in.
Controlling what's happening domestically is a starting point, but it's not a panacea, particularly when the United States is just a couple hours down the road.
He says gun violence stems from systemic poverty, and that's what authorities need to stop first. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
Almost a third of the violence this weekend happened in the city's northwest end. That's where a community meeting took place tonight, actually in response to a tragic death at a TCH building last week. Residents expressing their frustrations directly to police and Toronto community housing executives. Raquel DeYoon was there.
This should be the last house she ever loses.
Emotions still raw inside Falstaff Community Center, less than a week after 16-year-old Hanad Abdullahi was killed in a stairway in a TCHC building nearby. Many of his family and friends present tonight.
They took away my child life, and you have to know that.
We can't accept it. Every day died someone. After that, we don't find any fight. So we need justice.
There's been no arrest so far. At tonight's meeting, TCHC outlined some steps they will be taking to improve security, including more community safety officers on patrol through the night, enhanced lighting, cameras to capture license plates of vehicles, as well as a safety audit.
Where we physically walk the entire premise and identify how we can enhance security across the premises.
But many want more.
Security cameras in the hallways, in the elevators.
We have to be very cautious because, when we did the modernization plan and we walked around and spoke to all of the communities, one of the things that they had great concerns for was they're saying we don't want to be surveyed.
It's a nightmare that I cannot get up from.
Evelyn Fox lost her son 3 years ago. Beyond security, she wants to see more supports for young people.
They can't take the layers upon layers upon layers of trauma. At some point in time, they're going to get desensitized. We need OHIP-covered supports that are in the communities and are homicide-specific to allow these children and these communities to heal.
Actions have to take place. This is a good start that the community is coming together, but where's the youth? The youth need to be here. They need to express their ideas as well.
Toronto Police and TCHC say they hope to work with the community to improve safety. Kelda Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
A sentencing hearing will continue tomorrow for the man who opened fire at the Eaton Centre 7 years ago. Christopher Husbands was killed 2 people and injured several others in the summer of 2012. Our Ali Chasson was in court today where victim impact statements were read.
It's been 7 years since Christopher Husbands ran up on 2 men in the Eaton Centre food court. Firing 14 times. He killed his childhood friend Nixon Nirmalendran and an acquaintance, Ahmed Hassan. Husbands wounded 5 others in the spray of bullets. Today, we heard from some of those people caught in the gunfire.
They focused on that split second.
Like Craig Stevenson, who vividly described with pictures his son Connor's injuries, looking Husbands in the eye.
I didn't see any remorse. He was pretty bland. He sat there and looked at the pictures, then looked away, looked at me, looked at the pictures, and then looked away. And it didn't look like there was any remorse.
Christopher Husbands was convicted of manslaughter, not murder. In February, his defense team successfully argued their client had PTSD and snapped that day in June 2012 after recognizing his attackers from when he was jumped and stabbed earlier that year. They convinced the jury the killings played out like a misguided type of street justice.
This is not supposed to be a defense for a gang shooting. I mean, it just, I hope that something different comes out of this. I hope that at least the maximum sentence is given or another trial to really set the tone for this is not allowed in this city.
The mandatory minimum for a manslaughter conviction is 4 years. Husbands would likely get credit having served the last 7 years already in custody, something that chills Connor, who is lucky to be standing here today.
I think what changed my life most is actually seeing how this trial process has gone. I mean, I thought I lived in Canada, I thought we had a system where people who murdered people in the middle of a mall on camera would go to jail for it and not be out in 7 or 10 years.
The Crown is arguing for the max, life in prison, or at the very least, the maximum for 5 lesser charges of aggravated assault. And for Connor's injuries, criminal negligence causing bodily harm to tack on more years. There was some real drama inside that courtroom today. Craig Stevenson actually mimicked the sound of the gunfire, saying bang so loud that it echoed inside the courtroom. This sentencing hearing is expected to carry on for the next several weeks. There are still submissions to be heard and experts to be heard from. The judge has a lot to consider in this case when handing down his sentence. It's a case that has carried on for 7 years already. Ali Chasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Colette Kennedy's here with the first look at the forecast. And Colette, with all that wild weather that went through the city today, I finally saw something I've never seen before living in Toronto. Lightning actually striking the top of the CN Tower. I saw on the way into work.
And I am jealous, Mike, because I've only seen these phenomenal pictures of that, right?
I didn't have my camera out. This was like IRL. I saw it, not on Instagram.
Yeah, very cool. So you saw one of the, on average, I think it's 75 strikes that it sees in a year, and you got to see one of those. So hopefully one of these days I see it too. And hey, you have that risk or that opportunity, I guess I should say, of seeing a little bit of lightning because we've got kind of these waves coming through, a couple of cold fronts over a few days that have have to work their way through. That's why we had that line of storms earlier out ahead at the front. And we still have that risk of an isolated shower into tomorrow morning. We could see this especially around the shoreline, but it looks like primarily towards the east or down around here to the south of us, where we'll have more of a risk of a few wet roadways. Then we get into some drier conditions during the day, but still some cloud cover through there, variable skies. And in the afternoon, a few showers kind of popping up, isolated thunderstorms. There's that chance too, but it's going to be pretty sparse, I think, in terms of what we're going to see tomorrow afternoon. We get into a break as we go through the night Wednesday, then Thursday, the next action's going to move through. I'll show you more about that coming up, but for now, overnight tonight, 19, your overnight low, running about 5 degrees above seasonal, and that slight chance tomorrow afternoon you could get some wet weather, 27, feeling still like 33. The cool down's coming, Mike. I'll tell you when.
Okay, thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
If you were at City Hall tonight, you may have seen peace lanterns floating in the reflecting pool at Nathan Phillips Square, part of a ceremony to mark 74 years since the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
It's a push for nuclear abolition. We want to educate the public on the dangers of nuclear weapons and the real threat today that nuclear weapons hold.
And that message taking on extra significance tonight with U.S. President Trump's recent withdrawal from the INF Treaty and threats of a renewed nuclear arms race. Organizers say there are almost 14,000 nuclear weapons on the planet. The ceremony ended with paper lanterns being released in the reflecting pool.
He was stolen. They didn't have to provide ownership for his sale. And there's just no accountability.
This woman had to sell her truck to buy back a horse that was already hers. And she's still searching for another one after the couple she leased the animal to allegedly sold it. That story coming up. The UK's newly appointed Minister of Foreign Affairs made his first official visit to Toronto today, speaking about how Brexit will change his country's relationship with Canada.
Yes, we're going to remain, and we hope to be good European neighbours, partners and friends in the future. But we do want to grasp those global opportunities, and we want to expand our horizons and raise our level of ambitions in the world. And as part of that, we want to take our friendship with Canada and the Canadian people to the next level.
Dominic Raab met with Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Chrystia Freeland, saying he wants to work more closely on things like trade, security and human rights, as well as global challenges like climate change. British officials are committed to leaving the EU by October 31st. A Collingwood woman is trying to track down one of her horses after she says 2 of them were stolen. It all started when Rachel Baker rented them out to a woman in Peterborough last year. But as Kelda Yoon tells us, after the lease expired, her horses disappeared.
It was an emotional reunion for Rachel Baker and her 13-year-old horse, Action.
The words kind of can't describe it.
But getting to this point wasn't easy. She says she had to sell her truck to buy him back 2 months ago, and she still hasn't found her other horse, Olivia. The ordeal began in early 2018 when Baker leased out both horses to a woman named Janice Hollett-Taylor, seen here riding Olivia. In the rental contract, Hollett-Taylor states the horses would be used for pleasure, competition, and training.
It's very normal in the industry.
At first, Baker says she received updates, but then
Basically, she just fell off the radar and she never contacted me back.
after the lease was up, she went to Hollett-Taylor's farm with police, but the horses were nowhere to be found. She did some digging and eventually tracked down Action online. By then, he had been sold twice.
And that's how fast these horses can go missing and go through all these different auctions.
Baker isn't the only one who feels betrayed. Dylan Cowles is a childhood friend of Hollett-Taylor. He says he spent $20,000 to take care of Action and Olivia after Hollett-Taylor offered to make him an owner. He says she told him they were rescues.
I was like, free horses, no big deal there. Just have to pay for their bills and everything.
Cowles says he stopped paying when she wouldn't give him receipts. Shortly after, he says she blocked him from contacting her, claiming the horses were hers.
I felt really bad. I felt taken advantage of.
Baker brought OPP evidence that her horses were in fact stolen. Hollett-Taylor and her husband are now both facing fraud, theft, as well as animal cruelty related charges. She has not responded to our multiple requests for comment. Baker, meanwhile, wants more to be done to regulate the sale of horses.
He was stolen. They didn't have to provide ownership for his sale. And there's just no accountability.
Gail Ecker, director of Equine Guelph, says sadly having ownership papers is not mandatory.
It would be nice if the laws changed because that would certainly give the horse a lot more protection than what it has right now.
She says the most important thing is to do your homework and get to know the person who's leasing your horse. And while she's overjoyed to have Action back, Baker is still searching for Olivia. And Dylan, he will be visiting Action later this month.
I'm going to bring him a watermelon. It's his favorite thing.
That's a good boy.
Kelda Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
Remember, if you have a story you'd like us to look into, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email, torontotips@cbc.ca. Canadian showdown at the Rogers Cup in Toronto tonight. Andreescu versus Bouchard. We'll tell you who came out on top after the break.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
One of the most anticipated matches this year at the Rogers Cup tonight, an all-Canadian lineup. Bianca Andreescu taking on Jeannie Bouchard. First set, Andreescu successfully fought off 3 set points, but goes too long with the forehand. Bouchard would take the first set 6-4, but Andreescu goes up early in the second. Bouchard wasn't able to hold serve once, and Andreescu takes the win 6-1. Third set, both athletes with some terrific shots, but at match point, Bouchard misses wide right there. Andreescu takes third set 6-4 and wins her first match back in action since the French Open in May. And Blue Jays and Rays with Game 2 of their series last night. Jays had a 2-0 shutout last night with that win. But tonight, Toronto goes up to an early lead tonight. 2 on, 2 out in the second for Brandon Drury. He smacks one left field. That makes it 3-0 right now. Tampa with some really sloppy defense. Look at this. Throwing the ball around. Danny Jansen's grounder actually turned into 2 runs. Jays up 6-0 at this point, but Tampa would come back to tie it, force extra innings, and a heartbreak win on a bases-loaded wild pitch by Buddy Rochers. This one taking place in the bottom of the 10th, 7-6 win. Well, Jays are already looking forward to next season, at least off the field, saying they will extend the protective netting at the Rogers Centre next year. The team says it's designed to help fans keep safe. The Jays will also extend the netting at their spring training stadium in Dunedin. Other baseball teams have done the same after several injuries to fans from foul balls in recent years. In one incident last year, a 79-year-old woman died after being hit in the head by a ball at Dodger Stadium. Well, Nick Nurse is back coaching basketball in the city with a big game set for tomorrow night, but it's not with the Raptors. Here's Nurse at the OVO Athletic Center today, attempting to get the men's national team a berth in the Olympics for the first time in almost 2 decades. Basketball Canada appointed Nurse head coach of the team at the end of June. They're preparing for a 2-game exhibition series against Nigeria in the city tomorrow. They'll head to China for the World Cup in September. Colette Kennedy is back with their extended forecast. Another humid day on tap for tomorrow, but you said there's a cool down coming.
There is a cool down coming. We're going to see not only the temperatures coming down, but really that humidity dropping off as we get to the end of the week. But we have a few humid days, some sticky days still to get through. Something I want to point out when we take a look at the almanac here is that now our average high is around 26.6 and our average low 14.9. So they're starting to come down a little bit as we're getting into August. So we kind of go up and we spike and peak, and then we start to move down again. Record high for this date in history, 35.9. We had a humidex at 35 today, and that came back in 2001. But the daytime highs, this is what they looked at like unofficially around not only the region, but through southern and eastern Ontario, 27 for the Windsor area. But again, feeling like about 35. Through the overnight, an isolated shower or thunderstorm not out of the question, but a greater chance seeing that around the lakeshore tomorrow morning to the east and to the west or southwest of the city, and then getting into a drier trend, at least for the time being, into tomorrow morning for southwestern Ontario. Then some thunderstorms or some showers start to develop into the afternoon hours, and that same chance for a few pockets, mostly to the north of the GTA. But again, that comes back tomorrow afternoon. Then the next wave is going to be rolling through. That comes into Thursday, so we'll probably start the day off just fine. Into the afternoon hours, into the evening, we'll see showers and thunderstorms again. Once we get through that, we really go into a new pattern where that new air mass moves in, and that's where we get into the drier, meaning lower dew points, but also seeing the temperatures coming down in those daytime highs only around 24 degrees or so. Overnight tonight, still muggy for southwestern Ontario, lows just under 20 degrees with that slight shower risk. Same thing into tomorrow afternoon, but the highs soaring towards 29, maybe even peaking there at 30 degrees there into Leamington if you get a little more sunshine. For the GTA, similar in terms of our overnight lows, and then as we go into tomorrow afternoon, you just might want to have the umbrella kind of around. That's probably what I'll do. It'll be in my backpack, but likely in most areas, you're not going to need it. A look at the 5-day forecast then. It goes like this. It gets a little breezy with that next front coming in on Thursday. Southwesterly winds are going to pick up, and then we go into a northwesterly flow, kind of shut the door on the humidity. And so Friday, 24, feeling like 24 on Saturday too. Late Sunday, we'll see things changing over as the next system approaches, but it looks like at least the first part of the day pretty good. So we'll be headed towards another decent weekend coming up, Mike, but we got to get through this in the meantime.
That's good. As you say, bring the umbrella and you won't need it tomorrow. If you
yes,
don't have
if you forget it,
Yes.
exactly.
Oh, thanks
That's how
a lot,
it works. You're welcome.
Well, a Windsor man has won the distinction of drinking beer and running the fastest because, yes, there is a competition for that. We'll tell you more and how you might be able to enter coming up. A man from Windsor can claim the title of international champion when it comes to guzzling beer while running. That's not a frat boy thing. 24-year-old Corey Bellamore finished the Beer Mile World Championship race in Berlin in just over 4 minutes, while others struggled to keep the suds down.
I feel pretty good, but it's been 2 or 3 minutes since the race finished. I'm still not sure if I'm going to throw up. It's coming in waves.
Runners have to drink 4 beer and run a mile. If you throw up, you have to do an extra lap. Now, this boozy novelty race has a deep Canadian connection. It was brewed up in Ontario 5 years ago and has since gained international traction. 8 countries competed in this year's final. There are now similar races, including a milk mile, but none has been as popular as the beer mile. They even break down the results based on the type of beer you drink. Well, tomorrow on CBC Radio, you may find many of our shows remembering the late Toni Morrison. Metro Morning will be playing snippets of an interview the author did with Carol Off, even opening up the phone lines to hear which of her books are your favorites. And on Q, Yale University's Eugene Redman was a lifelong friend to Morrison. He'll take us back to the 60s for some incredible stories about the future Nobel laureate. That's tomorrow on CBC Radio 1. I'll see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Good night.